Hi guys, welcome to the Headphone Show. Today I have a review of the IFI stack. So right here we have the IFI Pro IDST DAC amp combo, and then next to it we have the IFI Pro ICANN headphone amplifier. These are both flagship units. The Pro IDST comes in right at around $2,500, and the Pro ICANN comes in at around $1,800. So let's take a look. Just so you guys are aware, the Pro ICANN was sent to me by IFI for evaluation, and I figured in order to best evaluate this, I should probably run it with its matching DAC. And so headphones.com sent me the DAC for evaluation, and that way I'm able to evaluate them both together. Now, if you're wondering what this is here, this is the Cayin IHA6, and this is my go-to solid-state balanced amplifier that is a little bit more specialized. And these two are both considerably more versatile, and that's going to be important to keep in mind as we go through this review, especially when considering at the end whether or not these are worth it. Now, I want to also mention before going further that we could spend hours talking about the various different specs and inputs and outputs and features and use cases and the difference between multi-bit and Delta Sigma and all this, but I'd rather kind of focus this review on the experience of using this, the way that they sound, and ultimately what I find interesting about them. And there are a number of different use cases that I think are important to key in on as well. So let's begin by talking about the build, design, aesthetics, all the intangibles. Yeah, these are fantastic. They're small, they look great, they can stack on top of one another if you do want to get the matching pair, and they look reasonably nice. I really like that they're small. I mean, as I have more source gear and more just stuff on my desk, I really start to value a small form factor for something like this. And it's impressive the amount of stuff that they've packed in here, given how small they are. And I also want to mention that they both have tube sections, and this imparts somewhat of an orange glow here, but I want to show you guys something. When I turn on the tube section, I have this plugged in here, this one's not. This orange glow, at the top here, it's made to look like there's a tube in here, and this says NOS General Electric on it. But if you look more closely into the unit itself, you'll see that the orange glow, I don't know if the camera picks it up, but you'll see that the orange glow here is being produced by LEDs, not an actual tube. So it's just meant to give you an indicator that the tube stage is on, a tube section is on. And it's not the actual tube that's emitting this glow. Like, I have a separate standalone tube amplifier that I'm evaluating, and which will be very interesting. We'll talk about that. But that one has real tubes that they actually do produce a glow. And this one, it's just LEDs. Still looks nice though. Okay, so let's jump in and talk about the DAC first. The Pro IDST, actually DAC amp combo. This is a quad Burr Brown multi-bit DAC. And some of you guys know what that means. It's basically just a different way of converting the digital to the analog signal, and it's apparently much more difficult to implement, but saving all of that for the spec sheet, which you guys can look at, and I'll leave a link below to the manual. It is still interesting to me that they did implement this with a multi-bit DAC. In my opinion, whether or not it's multi-bit is not sort of the line in the sand for what makes or breaks a good DAC, but it is one of the things that can influence the sound and can lead to it being a better DAC. When comparing the Pro IDST DAC here with the DAC of the IDST Micro Black Label, which they really need to change the names because it's incredibly confusing, that's a more entry-level DAC. It's not even a little bit better. It's clearly better. There's a noticeable step up as far as transparency, as far as textural qualities. When everything is volume matched, when everything is like the same, outputs, trying out different headphones, yeah, it's a noticeable step up here. Textural qualities. I find that the biggest difference is in that instrument separation distinction quality, and also textural qualities in the lower frequencies, not like bass necessarily, but like, let's say lower mid-range, maybe 200 to 400 hertz. It adds a bit of what I can only really describe as that crunch quality that I normally associate with higher end DACs. And while I'm still of the opinion that for DACs, once you're at a certain point, the difference between DACs is not huge. It's noticeable. I think most people, especially if you're using highly resolving headphones like the ZMF Verite, I think most people will be able to tell the difference between the lower end. I DSD Micro Black Label and this unit here. So in my opinion, the DAC here is probably the best version that I've heard, at least, of the Burr Brown chip and the Burr Brown implementation. But it should also be noted that if you're specifically looking for a Burr Brown DAC, a Burr Brown based DAC, this does not really sound or remind me that much of the Micro Black Label and the way that the presentation is. I find that the Micro Black Label is a little bit more relaxed, and the Pro IDSD here is a little bit more analytical. It's a little bit more almost normal, like other high-end DACs are, and I think that, I mean, that's a good thing. But if you're specifically looking for that, slightly softer presentation that maybe you're used to, I feel that that's not what they're doing here until you use the Tube Stage or Tube Plus, and then that kind of pulls things back a little bit and makes it not quite as analytic. Now with the Tube Stage here, once again, don't buy this with the intention of thinking that this is going to allow you to have both a solid state and a tube amplifier in one, because really the difference is so minimal here that you have to specifically be listening for it. And again, you need to be using the high resolution headphones. Now, I do want to also mention that there are a number of different filters that you can use, and there is a non-oversampling one. So you can use BitPerfect and BitPerfect Plus. And then they have what they call the Gibbs Transient Optimized. And then there's an apodizing filter and then a transient aligned filter. And again, I'll leave the manual. You can read up all about the different filters that they have, and really the filters make such a minimal difference. I think you could spend hours convincing yourself that you hear one thing or another when you're switching the different filters, and you could keep playing with it and tell yourself that you hear different presentation or more depth or whatever. But really, it is so minimal that I don't think it's worth buying specifically for a certain filter type. With that said, with the ZMF Verite, I liked the Gibbs Transient Optimized filter the best. And I know that's not the non-oversampling one, but for me, that's just what I ended up gravitating towards. I think if you did want to use the non-oversampling ones, you would probably best be suited for the BitPerfect Plus. Really what I think the DAC in this unit comes down to is probably the best implementation of the Burr Brown chip. It's just that you end up, in my opinion, spending more money for all the other features. Now, speaking of other features, this does have a capable headphone amplifier in it. And when I say capable, there's a lot of power there for the balanced output. The single-ended is not quite as powerful, but it'll still drive most headphones just fine. Maybe not like the most power-hungry headphones like the HE6 or the Susvara, stuff like that. But for just about everything else, that balanced output there, which is a 2.5 millimeter, it is plenty of power. So again, maybe it's better to evaluate this as a DAC amp combo, and then suddenly things start to seem a little bit more worth it. If you only want one unit as a standalone system, maybe you got a bunch of speakers and it's in a living room, and you also want to listen to headphones and you have some high performance headphones, then this is a great single unit. It takes up minimal space and it can do just about everything. I also want to mention that there is a DSD remaster function here with this button. You can tap it. There's two modes there. And I did not notice much of a difference at all. Again, it's one of those things where I could convince myself that maybe there's something here or there, but it's not enough where I really care. But I know some people are really into the DSD thing, and so this does have DSD functionality. That's just not something I'm into. And then it does do MQA as well. Once again, I don't get into that stuff as much. Speaking of using this as a standalone unit in your living room, you don't need to actually plug this into a computer to be able to run it. You can use this as a network streamer, so that's what this antenna is. Now again, that's not my use case, but I can absolutely see that being a reason to get it. And so it's important to think of this as something that could potentially fill that role. And you could stream it with Roon or Tidal or whatever. So to talk about that question of value and whether or not it's worth $2,500, well, for my application, sitting at a desk next to a computer with other amplifiers that have more power, that are more specialized, I don't really think that this unit, the Pro IDSD, is actually worth it. I think you can do at least as good for quite a bit less money with just a standalone DAC unit. I know that there's the RME ADI2 FS out now, and that's one that I'm hoping to evaluate soon, but something like that I think would be more appropriate for that kind of application. Now, with that said, if you're somebody who knows that you would use something like this with even just some of the other features that it has, like maybe you're using you're going to use the headphone output, or you're going to use this as a streamer, then suddenly it becomes quite a bit more price competitive. I think that's really what you need to consider if you're going to be looking into this. The iFi devices, people always talk about them as a Swiss Army knife, and I think that's accurate. Like, it'll do so many things that I don't have a use case for that you might, or that other people might. And if you even just use a few of them, suddenly I think this can satisfy a lot of those requirements. And what I really wish they would release at some point is a version of this DAC as a standalone DAC that doesn't have the rest of the functionality at half the price, or even just maybe a little bit less, like say $1,500. Then something like this becomes extremely competitive, and I start to look at this as a reasonable option for a kind of flagship standalone DAC, and I can pair it with a more specialized IHA6 or even the iCan Pro. But because it's not this specialized product, it's so versatile and has all these other features in it, I really don't think that it's worth the $2,500 if you don't use some of those other features. If you do, then it becomes more competitive. Looking at the Pro iCan amplifier, I've been using this for a long time, and in some ways, this amplifier is the best tool for a headphone reviewer. If you have tons of different headphones, or you're constantly evaluating different headphones that come in at different impedances, with different efficiencies, take more power, less power, more sensitive, with different terminations, this has the versatility to be able to do that. And I don't just mean as far as the different outputs that it has. If you compare this, the Pro iCan, with the Cayin IHA6 with sensitive headphones, the Pro iCan is far superior. Even when I use my Focal Elegia with the balanced output here, it's not a good fit because you do hear a little bit of low frequency hum there. And with the Pro iCan, you have so much more versatility there for a way wider range of headphone types. And yes, it can do the inefficiency planars. Actually, there's more power from the Pro iCan than there is from the IHA6. This is something like 14 watts or something ridiculous, and this only has 7. So, in my opinion, the fact that the Pro iCan is so incredibly versatile means that for somebody like me, this is an extremely useful device. Now, with that said, because it's not specialized, because it's not specifically intended to pair with one type of headphone, the way that something like the IHA6 might be more suited to, you end up making a little bit of a compromise. So once again, my evaluation of this is more from the solid state perspective, because the tube section here and the tube plus section, they make more of a difference here than they do on the Pro IDSD, but again, it's not a huge difference. It's just a very subtle, like just a tiny little bit extra space with highly resolving headphones like the Zyema Verite. I have no idea how either of these measure as on whatever equipment, but the most important thing here, the bottom line, is that the experience matters more than anything else. And for me, the experience is a very focused, forward, intimate, thick experience with the Pro iCan, and a much more spread out, spacious, yet a little bit more lean presentation with the IHA6. And I find that the IHA6 has a little bit more punch there as well. With the Pro iCan, there are also all these other different features, like for example the 3D effect, which increases the space, and then the extra bass. And in my mind, those are novelty features. I don't care about those. I know that they're in there, but that's not the reason to buy this. The Pro iCan is interesting and useful without those features, and if they hadn't included those features, there would still be a reason to have something like this. But I think you still need to ask yourself that question about versatility versus specialized. If you are a little bit more calculated and specific about your system, you can end up getting something like an IHA6 and an RME ADI2, or just another standalone DAC. That would be the better option. I think that would just ultimately sound better for less money. In my opinion, the Pro IDSD is the more interesting unit of the two, whereas the Pro iCan, it's just sort of like an amplifier that's ridiculously powerful, that also is extremely versatile, and you could buy an IHA6 and then also another amplifier that's for something else for the same amount of money. So in my mind, the Pro iCan is not quite as interesting as the Pro IDSD. I think the Pro IDSD is the more worthwhile unit if you do end up using some of the other features that I mentioned. Because remember that the Pro IDSD is a DAC amp combo, whereas the Pro ICANN is just an amplifier. But we also have to remember that the Pro ICANN is $1,800, and I can think of other amplifiers that don't have the drawbacks that the IHA6 does, are also versatile, and cost less money than this. And so for both of these units, while they both are very interesting and they both perform well and do a lot of really cool things, I feel that they've both just put too much stuff into them, and then that justifies the higher price tag because they are so versatile. And if you are a little bit more calculated with the purchase that you make for the rest of your equipment, something like this or the Pro IDSD, they stop being as competitive because you can find that more specialized item for the rest of your equipment, for the rest of the chain that you have. It's only when you start to acquire a lot more gear that you start to need something that's got a little bit more of the versatility that both of these units provide. And part of me also really likes the idea of being a little bit more calculated with the system that you're planning on building. If you, again, have something like a ZMF Verite, I love the idea of thinking about, okay, what's the best option for the ZMF Verite? What can I get that's going to get the most out of the ZMF Verite? Or say you have, Hi-Fi Man HE6. What's the best that I can do for Hi-Fi Man HE6? And I think in just about every case, these units are not the answer to those questions. I think these units are instead the answer to, well, I have a ton of headphones. What should I get to get rid of all the rest of the stuff that I have and just use one stack? And if that sounds like you, then yeah, I absolutely recommend this as that solution. And so ultimately, I think if you're looking into potentially buying either of these, or maybe you're looking at maybe buying the stack, I think it's also important to ask yourself, will I end up using these features? Especially when it comes to the DAC. Will I end up using this as a standalone unit or as a streamer? Will I end up using the headphone output? Will I end up using the tube modes, etc.? Because if the answer is no, I think you can get a lot more for a lot less if you just specialize a little bit. If the answer is yes, or if you have lots of different headphones, then I think something like this is exactly what you should be getting. Because remember, if you think about it, say you have 5 headphones. I don't know, like, who has 5 headphones? Well, I do, but say you have 5 headphones. Are you going to have 5 different amplifiers, one for each headphone? Are you going to have 5 different DACs? Probably not. And if you just want something that'll be able to work with everything, then yeah, I do recommend these. All right, that does it for this video. Thanks for taking the time to watch it, and I'll see you guys in the next one.